Yo, ho ho ho. It's Christmas time for sure, and that makes me think of books, because what's better than a Christmas book? And this one I wrote myself. This is Mickey's Christmas Around the World. It's actually a pop-up book that shows traditions around the world, just as the title says, but it also came with a tape. In fact, it was repackaged to look like this because I think a lot of people didn't realize that there was a book and an audio cassette here. And the book itself has a few lines of text for each spread, but it's the audio cassette that really tells the story of Mickey going around the world with Santa and discovering different customs throughout the world. And I wrote that audio story too. So while we're on the subject of books and Christmas, I'd like to share with you 5 favorite Christmas books of mine, not counting this one. For this first one, I'd like to go way back to 1947, and this is the Golden Christmas Book, which is a treasury. Does it say that? Let's see. Might as well see what it says here. Stories, songs, poems, riddles, and things to do for Christmas. Lots of pictures in full color and black and white. And it's a big golden book. This was published by Simon & Schuster, because in those days, Simon & Schuster published the golden books. But it's a really fantastic and charming collection of, here's some crafts you can do. You can make a 5-pointed star. Here's a puzzle and a picture story. It even has carols. Here's It Came Upon the Midnight Clear. Away in a Manger. There's A Visit from St. Nicholas, of course. These old-fashioned illustrations that really work with that old-fashioned poem. More carols and stories. Here's Deck the Hall. Some great art. And there's even some recipes. This one says goodies. You can make 3 recipes, including these fruit balls, which are kind of a candy. So it's a great collection. And I wanted to show you the end papers, which are really very charming. Let's take a look at the front. Now remember that tree? Well, here it is folding out. And isn't this great? And of course, this book is hard to find in this shape with this Christmas tree intact. Later printings, I think, didn't even have this kind of accordion pop-out tree, but it's really great. I feel very lucky to have this copy with this Christmas tree intact. Next, we have another golden book, a little golden book. And it's really one of my favorite little golden books of all. And that's really saying something. And to me, it's extra special because this was given to me as a Christmas gift a few years ago by my friend Mike Giamo, the famous and acclaimed Disney artist. So I know you're watching, Mike, so thank you again for this. It's very special. You knew I would like it, and indeed I do, because the illustrations are just so charming. They're very stylized. This was published in 1950, so it's, I guess we could say, very mid-century. Look how gorgeous these illustrations are. And it tells this very charming story of Betty and Bob going with their parents to their grandparents who live on a farm in the country for Christmas. And toward the end here, grandmother tells Bob the story, the animals on the farm who are getting ready for Christmas. So that's what the cover kind of illustrates. And she tells all kinds of wonderful details about how the tree is being trimmed by the pigeons in the loft, and the pigs are making the feast, and the cows are wrapping the presents. Now, I hope the pigs are not making any sort of pork dishes, and I hope that the cows are not wrapping up something made of leather. That wouldn't be right. But it's all very fun and imaginative. And of course, Betty and Bob go to sleep and they're waiting for Santa Claus. Fortunately, that last page here is ripped, but it makes it no less special. And really a beautiful work of art. Now there's a Disney connection here, not just because it's a little golden book, but because the pictures, as it says, are by Retta Worcester, if I'm pronouncing her name right, and her secret identity is Retta Scott. Yes, Retta Scott, the Disney legend, who was the first female animator at Disney. She worked on Bambi. She animated the hunting dogs, which is one of the very powerful sequences in that powerful film. So this is truly one of my favorites, and I think you can see why. Now, I said we were going to look at 5 books, but I lied. We're actually going to look at 6, because this is kind of a twofer. This is one of the very famous little square gift books, written and illustrated by Charles Schulz, starring the Peanuts characters, that were published in the 60s, and these were really popular. And of course, they started with the bestseller, Happiness is a Warm Puppy. This is Christmas is Together Time. Just as we had Happiness Is, we have Christmas Is. In this wonderful red and green paper. So we have Frida. Christmas is another box of candied fruit from your Aunt Agnes in California. Here we have Linus. Christmas is the church play, but why do I always have to be the shepherd? And in the animated special, A Charlie Brown Christmas, it's Shermie who says that line, more or less. Here's Lucy being very frustrated. Christmas is wishing you had gotten this stupid present gift wrapped. So all these delightful little reflections on the Christmas season, all the little details, and also capturing the Peanuts characters, their personalities, of course, with this wonderful art. Christmas is a time of hope, a time of loving, a time of joy. Christmas makes the rest of the year worthwhile. A few years back, Peanuts expert Nat Gertler put together this book in the very same style as the classic books, called Charlie Brown's Christmas Stocking. And this reprinted 2 Peanuts holiday classics from women's magazines of the 1960s. The first one, Charlie Brown's Christmas Stocking, was originally published in 1963, and here it is republished. The illustrations are really great, and it's basically Charlie Brown going around to the different characters and talking to them about Christmas stockings and getting their reflections. Here's good old Shermie, one of the very first Peanuts characters who kind of faded away as the years went by. What worries me most is how Santa Claus is going to find where I live. On our block, all the houses look alike. Here's little Sally. Do you realize there's no place in this house to hang a Christmas stocking? I say let's sue the architect. The second story is simply called A Christmas Story. It was published in 1968 originally, and it's Linus reading the Christmas story to Snoopy, kind of getting his reaction. Then later, Lucy comes along and tells him about Santa Claus, and she said, being a stupid beagle, of course you wouldn't understand about that. Each year, little kids all over the world write to this fat guy up at the North Pole. They tell him what they want for Christmas. And then Snoopy kind of thinks about it and says, I'm going to have to be careful. All this theology could ruin my Christmas. Those Peanuts books were, of course, by Charles Schulz. Let's move on to another cartoonist, this time from Britain, the famous cartoonist Ronald Searle. And of course, he did all kinds of work in the United States as well. And these are his illustrations for Charles Dickens' famous A Christmas Carol, probably the most famous Christmas story of all time. Ronald Searle, in his distinctive style, illustrates this book with all the familiar characters. Here in the back we have Bob Cratchit and Tiny Tim. Inside there's both color and black and white. Here we have one of the color plates. This is Fezziwig's Party with Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig. And you can see his style if you're not already familiar with it. Here's the Ghost of Christmas Past visiting Scrooge. The Cratchit children waiting for the Christmas pudding. And so many of the famous scenes. Here, take a look at the end paper again. Cratchit children looking at all the food in the window, being hungry because they know they're having a feast, but it won't be that elaborate, but they're still grateful for it. Still grateful to be together. Ronald Searle's style really captures the flavor and atmosphere of this very atmospheric story. It's really wonderful. But there's something about his style that captures the wonderful events of the story, but also the darker aspects. Because we know that however people think about A Christmas Carol, it's scary and dark. First of all, the most powerful of Christmas stories need to be a little dark. Because Christmas is about the light overcoming the darkness, isn't it? And he even has this illustration for a part of the story that many, if not most, adaptations leave out. It's these horrifying children, this boy and girl, that are under the robes of the spirit of Christmas present. And he says, the girl is want, the boy is ignorance. And Scrooge says, Spirit, are they yours? They are man's, said the spirit, looking down upon them, and they cling to me, appealing from their fathers. This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Beware them both in all of their degree, but most of all beware this boy, for on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased. That is a timely message for when the story was originally written in the Victorian era, for 1960 when this particular edition was published, and certainly for now. I think that if his style looks familiar, it may be because of one particular project, which is another Christmas Carol adaptation, and that is the film Scrooge from 1970, the musical starring Albert Finney, because Ronald Searle did the titles for that wonderful film. So he was well versed in A Christmas Carol. Now, I said that A Christmas Carol is the most famous of all Christmas stories. Well, excepting one, the first. And here we have the First Noel, the birth of Christ from the Gospel according to St. Luke. And this is, again, published by Golden Press. It was issued in 1959 and is illustrated by the Provensens. So you might remember me talking about those particular artists in my video about breakfast cereals, because Martin Provensen designed Tony the Tiger. And the Disney connection here is that Martin worked for Disney during the golden era, and Alice also came from animation because she worked for Walter Lantz. But in the 50s and forward, they became very well-regarded illustrators, and you can see why. Now, they chose to be, their work was always pretty stylized, but they chose to be very, very stylized in retelling the story of the birth of Jesus. And it's quite bracing, actually, to see this familiar story told in this very stark, almost, way. Very artful, but stark, we might say. And what's very interesting, I think, to kind of top it all off, is that their artistry extended not just to these illustrations, but to typography. We can see that in the words of the story. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them. So you can see the different ways the Provensens used the type itself to tell the story, almost as an illuminated manuscript might do, but in this really cool mid-century style. But for the end papers, and we seem to be talking a lot about end papers with these books, but that's because the end papers are also works of art in themselves for these wonderful books. They use the words from Isaiah prophesying the promised one. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. His name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace.
King of Kings,